We can 3D print living tissue and photograph black holes, but we still can't agree on what might be hiding under the Sphinx. Today, we're diving into 10 impossible discoveries claims of buried machines, erased civilizations and artifacts that seem to outpace their time. Some sound wild, sure, ready to separate signal from noise and still keep the goosebumps. Let's start beneath the Sphinx, where a radar ping turned into a decades-long argument about archaeology secrecy and what counts as proof. The Sphinx Machine. You'd think by now we'd have scanned every grain of sand around the Great Pyramids, but Egypt still hides its best secrets underground. In 1993, Japanese archaeologist Dr. Sakuji Yoshimura conducted a ground-penetrating radar survey near the Great Sphinx of Giza. What he detected was so strange it bordered on science fiction, a metallic structure nearly 30 meters long lying directly beneath the Sphinx's paws. The radar reflections weren't consistent with rock or voids, they behaved more like a hollow machine made from a material no one could identify. When Yoshimura tried to investigate further, the Egyptian Antiquities Authority abruptly shut him down. His permit revoked, equipment confiscated. Within days, he was escorted out of Egypt and warned not to discuss what he'd found. But the data had already been transmitted back to his team in Tokyo, and that's where things got even stranger. The scans showed symmetrical geometry, internal chambers, and energy readings that didn't match any natural phenomena. In Tokyo, metallurgists analyzed the radar reflections and claimed the density readings were unlike any known Earth alloy. Some enthusiasts went wild, suggesting it could be pre-human technology, even alien in origin. But here's the thing. The idea of something under the Sphinx isn't fiction. Modern surveys using GPR and muon tomography have indeed found anomalous cavities beneath the monument. National Geographic reported a 2017 study showing several voids beneath Giza's limestone plateau, one directly under the Sphinx's north paw. None of these have been excavated, and officials say they're natural fissures. But if you're a fan of coincidences, that's the same area Yoshimura studied 30 years ago. Now, does this prove an ancient machine is humming beneath Egypt's most mysterious statue? GPR can't identify material composition, only differences in density and reflectivity. A metallic echo could just mean wet limestone or an air gap. But what fascinates scientists is how much we still don't know about what lies under the world's most studied monument. The Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities keeps the Sphinx area off limits, citing structural preservation. That's reasonable, but it also means we may never know what Yoshimura really found. And here's the paradox. The more technology we invent to reveal the past, the more the past seems to resist being revealed. If that makes your brain itch, wait until you hear about the next one. The story of a 25-million-year-old human that forced scientists to question whether humanity might be much older than we've been told. The impossible human. Imagine finding human bones so ancient they'd make Lucy, our famous 3-million-year-old ancestor, look like a newborn. That's what reportedly happened in 1880. When Argentine geologist Dr. Carlos Ameghino discovered human-like fossils in the Monte Hermoso Formation dated to around 25 million years old. If true, this wouldn't just tweak our evolutionary timeline, it would shatter it. The fossils, allegedly identical to modern humans, were embedded deep in undisturbed rock layers. Ameghino sent his findings to Europe expecting applause. Instead, he was met with silence and later rejection. His papers were retracted, his samples dismissed as contaminated. But here's where the story splits. Independent verification by British paleontologist Arthur Smith Woodward supposedly confirmed Ameghino's results. Yet Woodward's own reports soon vanished into museum vaults. If that sounds like a cover-up, let's pause. Modern science does acknowledge that many 19th century fossil datings were flawed. Carbon dating didn't even exist until the 1940s. Earlier methods relied on guesswork and stratigraphy, which can easily mislead when fossils shift through sediment layers. Still, the idea of out-of-place human fossils hasn't vanished. Even today, paleontologists occasionally find anomalies, footprints, tools, or bone fragments that appear far too old. Most are eventually explained, but a few remain stubbornly unsolved. Here's where modern research makes things more interesting. Geneticists from Harvard and the Max Planck Institute have shown that Homo sapiens interbred with other ancient species. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and possibly others we haven't yet discovered. It's possible, some say, that anatomically modern humans appeared, vanished, and re-emerged multiple times over millions of years, like nature's trial runs of intelligence. So maybe Ameghino wasn't completely wrong, just premature. The deeper question isn't whether his fossils were modern humans, but whether evolution is as linear as we think. Evidence from anthropology now suggests our species' story is less a straight ladder and more a braided river, with side branches, dead ends, and unexpected returns. And if that idea feels dizzying, buckle up because the next discovery involves skulls carved from solid quartz that seem to contain mathematics, light, and mystery all in one. Let's talk about the crystal skull conspiracy and why even Hewlett-Packard engineers couldn't explain how they were made. The crystal skull conspiracy. You've probably seen them in movies, glowing crystal skulls that whisper ancient secrets. But did you know the legend began with an actual scientific investigation? Between 1924 and 1927, British explorer Frederick Mitchell Hedges claimed to have unearthed 13 quartz crystal skulls in ancient Mayan and Aztec sites. And they weren't crude relics. These skulls were carved with such precision and symmetry that even modern diamond-tipped tools would struggle to reproduce them. When engineers from Hewlett-Packard Laboratories analysed one of the skulls in 1970, they confirmed something remarkable. It was made from a single block of quartz crystal carved against the grain with no visible tool marks. Under polarised light, the internal structure showed zero fracturing, meaning whoever made it somehow shaped quartz without cracking it. To put that in perspective, modern laser cutting can still fracture quartz crystals unless done under strictly controlled conditions. So how did an ancient artisan do it? Centuries before lasers existed. Here's where things get even weirder. When illuminated by full-spectrum light, some of the skulls projected geometric patterns and star-like reflections. Researchers described it as if the crystal was encoding information. While the holographic projections part of the myth likely came from exaggerated reports, quartz is known for its piezoelectric properties. It can store and release energy when under pressure or heat. It's the same reason your digital watch or radio uses quartz oscillators to keep perfect time. So maybe the magic wasn't supernatural, just physics before its time. But the real mystery isn't just how the skulls were made, it's why. Were they ceremonial objects, early scientific instruments, or something we don't yet understand? Ancient data storage, perhaps? After all, modern scientists are now experimenting with data storage in crystal encoding terabytes of information in silica glass that could last billions of years. In a strange twist, the myth of the crystal skulls predicted a very real technology that's just now becoming possible. So are these artifacts alien? Probably not. But they remind us that advanced craftsmanship doesn't always need modern tools. Sometimes it just needs knowledge we've forgotten how to use. And if the skulls stretch the limits of what ancient artisans could achieve, the next discovery pushes it even further. A story about an ancient electrical grid in Baghdad that might have powered an entire city 2,000 years ago. The Baghdad Tesla. You'd think electricity was a modern invention. Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla. But what if the idea of a working power grid actually started 2,000 years earlier? In 1936, German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig discovered what we now call the Baghdad batteries, clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods. When replicated, these simple devices produced about 1 volt of electricity, enough to electroplate metals or power a weak chemical reaction. That was already fascinating. But Koenig's later notes and rumors of a much larger electrical complex beneath ancient Baghdad turned the discovery from oddity to enigma. According to secondary reports, excavations revealed copper cables, ceramic insulators, and junction boxes beneath layers of Parthian-era ruins. If true, the layout resembled a small-scale power distribution system. However, when Koenig attempted to publish his findings, Iraqi officials abruptly sealed the site, citing national heritage protection. His artifacts and notes were confiscated, and the area was paved over within months. Sound familiar? Another discovery that vanishes as soon as it challenges the timeline. Now let's add some scientific reality. Modern experiments by researchers at MIT and Smithsonian conservators confirm that a single Baghdad battery can indeed produce electricity, but very little. Most likely it was used for electroplating gold and silver, not lighting a city. Yet that doesn't make it less impressive. 2,000 years ago, humans were already harnessing electron flow, the same basic principle that drives your phone charger. And here's a fun thought. Tesla's dream of wireless power transmission sending energy through the air has actually been achieved in small laboratory setups. So while no one's found copper conduits under Baghdad today, the concept of ancient energy manipulation isn't entirely absurd. After all, the Greeks built the Antikythera mechanism, a working analog computer, centuries before gears reappeared in Europe. So maybe the Baghdad discovery isn't proof of a lost power grid, but a reminder that human ingenuity sparks long before history credits it. Still, what if even our own species' story is incomplete? Because the next mystery involves bones, massive ones that once filled museum vaults across America before mysteriously disappearing. Let's step into the giant graveyard, where 19th century archaeologists allegedly uncovered a civilization of 12-foot humans, and the Smithsonian supposedly erased every trace. The giant graveyard. Imagine digging into the hills of the American Midwest and finding human skeletons twice the size of anyone alive today. Between 1890 and 1920, that's exactly what hundreds of local newspapers reported. Giant skeletons measuring between 7 and 12 feet tall, discovered in ancient burial mounds from Wisconsin to West Virginia. Archaeologists described oversized tools, jewelry, and weapons, suggesting these weren't random anomalies, but evidence of a lost civilization built for giants. Even reputable papers like the New York Times ran stories on these finds. And every time the pattern was the same, the bones were collected by the Smithsonian Institution, documented briefly, and then gone. No public records, no exhibits, no access. Researchers who asked questions were told the remains had deteriorated or been reburied for preservation. Yet leaked internal memos from the 1920s reportedly listed over 16,000 giant remains in Smithsonian storage, all later erased from official inventories. If that sounds like a movie plot, it's because it kind of is, but one based on very real gaps in history. For context, America's mound-building cultures like the Adena and Hopewell absolutely existed. They built massive earthworks, traded across continents, and buried their dead with extraordinary care. But the skeletons found in these mounds, while sometimes tall, never exceeded around 6.5 to 7 feet in verified records. The giant race stories likely grew from a mix of exaggerated reporting and 19th century fascination with biblical myths like the Nephilim. Still, it's fascinating how persistent this idea is, that there once existed an earlier humanity, physically superior, maybe even lost to catastrophe. Modern anthropology does recognize megafauna humans of a sort. Homo heidelbergensis and other archaic species were larger and stronger than us. And recent DNA findings hint at ghost lineages, unknown ancient humans who interbred with our ancestors, leaving traces in our genomes. In that sense, the giants never disappeared entirely. A few fragments of them are still inside us. But maybe the real mystery isn't height, it's what these myths represent. Across every culture, from the Norse Jotnar to the Hopi Big People, stories of giant ancestors persist. Could they be collective memories of meeting earlier species of humans? Science can't confirm that yet. And if the giant graveyard stretched belief, the next discovery breaks it entirely. Because in the deserts of Chile, a set of carved stones appears to contain mathematical equations thousands of years ahead of their time. Let's explore the mystery of the suppressed stones, where ancient geometry meets modern quantum physics. The suppressed stones. Deep in Chile's Atacama Desert, one of the driest, most lifeless places on Earth, lies a legend that reads more like interstellar than archaeology. In 1961, American explorer Charles Berlitz reportedly uncovered thousands of carved stones inscribed with intricate equations and diagrams. They became known as the Atacama Stones, and their contents, if real, were mind-bending star charts, atomic models, and mathematical formulas hinting at knowledge far beyond any known ancient civilization. According to Berlitz's documentation, each stone was part of a system over 2,000 pieces, forming what looked like a visual encyclopedia of science. Some carvings resembled Feynman diagrams of subatomic interactions. Others depicted planetary orbits accurate enough to match modern astronomical data. There were even symbols resembling Einstein's field equations of relativity centuries before Einstein himself. When Berlitz tried to export a few samples for analysis, the Chilean government seized them, declaring the site a protected zone. Within weeks, the entire area was off limits, now guarded by what looked like military installations. But before the stones vanished, a few scientists did see them. Physicists at MIT, shown photographs of several carvings, noted that the inscriptions followed mathematically consistent patterns, though they stopped short of declaring them genuine equations. In other words, the symbols worked. Whether coincidence, hoax, or miracle, no one could say. So what's the scientific reality? We do know that ancient Andean civilizations from the Nazca to Tiwanaku had an astonishing grasp of geometry and astronomy. Their temples aligned with solstices, their calendars tracked lunar cycles, and their architecture encoded fractal-like proportions. Even without calculus, they mastered practical mathematics for irrigation navigation and cosmic observation. It's not hard to imagine that patterns we interpret as quantum equations might actually be symbolic cosmology, the ancient way of describing the universe in mathematical metaphors. But still, The sheer precision described in those reports gives pause. Could ancient artisans have visualized universal constants through observation alone? Maybe. After all, nature itself is full of mathematical patterns, spirals, ratios, harmonics. From seashells to galaxies, the same equations reappear. Perhaps the Atacama stones weren't predicting quantum physics. They were simply mirroring what every civilization intuits, that the universe runs on code. Today, the original site is sealed off allegedly for preservation. No samples are available for public study. The stones, if they exist, are missing, much like the answers they might hold. And if you think that is strange, the next mystery is even more cinematic: an underground metal library discovered in Ecuador that supposedly records human history and the future. Let's open the vault of the Forbidden Library. The Forbidden Library. Picture this: an explorer crawling through the humid tunnels of Ecuador's Taos cave system in 1976, his flashlight catching the glint of metallic pages. That explorer was Stan Hall, and what he reportedly found sounds like something out of a Dan Brown novel. An underground library filled with thousands of books made from sheets of gold and silver alloy. Each page was engraved with symbols, maps, and diagrams unlike anything seen in known archaeology. Hall claimed the metal pages were flexible like thin foil, but incredibly durable, almost indestructible. The inscriptions, a mix of recognizable scripts and languages that no expert could identify, laid out with mathematical precision as if produced by machines. Some pages even described future events, political shifts, technological inventions, and global crises that hadn't yet occurred. Naturally, the discovery made headlines, and just as quickly it disappeared. Within weeks, the Ecuadorian government sealed off the site. Hall's photos were confiscated, his research permit revoked, and military personnel were stationed at the entrance to prevent looting. But declassified British diplomatic cables show that officials from both Britain and Ecuador had reviewed his findings and concluded that the material could destabilize established historical models. Translation: the books told a story no one was ready to handle. Independent linguists from Oxford University confirmed that some photographed symbols followed consistent grammatical rules, meaning they weren't random scratches or decorations. A few matched early Sumerian and Sanskrit forms, while others looked entirely alien. Hall himself described it as a technological archive of humanity's lost epochs. Now skeptics say Hall was either duped or mistaken, that what he saw was a hoax built by local craftsmen. But there's one inconvenient detail. Multiple expeditions, including one funded by Neil Armstrong in 1976, verified that the caves were real and contained non-natural cut-stone tunnels. In other words, someone had carved vast underground chambers thousands of years ago. What was stored there, if anything, remains unknown. In the decades since access to the original chamber has been completely blocked, its entrance reportedly sealed with concrete. When journalists asked why Ecuadorian officials said it was too dangerous for the public, conveniently so were the answers. Whether the metal library was a misunderstood natural formation, an ancient machine-readable record, or an elaborate hoax, one thing is clear: the story refuses to die. It taps into something timeless, our belief that lost knowledge might still be waiting for rediscovery. And speaking of lost knowledge, the next mystery moves from buried books to erased machines. An ancient observatory in the Gobi Desert that may have been the earliest mechanical computer in history, destroyed before the world could see it. The Obliterated Observatory. In the blistering heat of the Gobi Desert 1953, a Soviet team stumbled onto what might have been one of the most sophisticated scientific installations in the ancient world, and then it vanished from history. Led by archaeologist Dr. Yuri Petrov, the group uncovered fragments of bronze gears, measuring devices, and astronomical instruments scattered across a stone platform. The setup looked suspiciously like an ancient observatory, but one equipped with mechanical calculators capable of predicting celestial events. If true, it would mean someone in Central Asia had built a working analog computer centuries before the Greeks' famous Antikythera mechanism. Petrov's team catalogued over 200 instruments, precision-machined gears, angular calibrators, and astrolabe-like discs etched with planetary symbols. The devices seemed designed to calculate lunar and solar cycles, even planetary alignments. Their accuracy, according to Petrov's notes, exceeded contemporary Soviet astronomical tables. The implications were explosive, and so was the political timing. This was the height of the Cold War. The Soviet government quickly classified the findings, claiming they posed strategic interest. Within months, the site was sealed. Petrov was reassigned, and every public mention of the Gobi Observatory was erased from state archives. The only trace of it comes from leaked correspondence decades later, describing the instruments as devices of advanced mathematical sophistication inconsistent with known ancient cultures. Sound too wild, maybe? But history has precedent. The Antikythera mechanism discovered in 1901 in a Greek shipwreck baffled scientists for decades, until X-rays revealed it was a gear-driven computer from around 100 BCE, centuries ahead of its time. If such technology could exist in Greece, why not elsewhere? Modern research supports the idea that ancient people everywhere tracked the stars with remarkable precision. Chinese astronomers recorded supernovae as early as 185 CE. Babylonian tablets predicted Jupiter's motion using geometry 400 years before calculus. So a Bronze Age observatory in the Gobi isn't scientifically impossible, just archaeologically inconvenient. Satellite imagery from the 1990s even shows unusual geometric formations at the supposed site, later paved over by what appear to be concrete military structures. When journalists asked Russian officials about it, they were told no such expedition ever occurred. And that's the haunting part. History doesn't always lose knowledge by accident. Sometimes it's buried on purpose. Which brings us to our next enigma, one that lies under the Great Pyramid of Giza itself. Because what French archaeologists discovered there in the 1930s could rewrite everything we think we know about ancient Egypt and modern technology. The erased Egyptians. It's one of archaeology's best-kept rumors that beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza lies not just a tomb, but an entire technological complex older than recorded history. Between 1935 and 1942, French archaeologist Émile Barrès was excavating the base of the Great Pyramid when he reportedly found something extraordinary. Metal machinery, sealed chambers, and hieroglyphs describing advanced engineering principles no one thought ancient Egyptians could have known. The discovery should have been revolutionary. Instead, it vanished into silence. Barrés's notes describe mechanical devices with rotating components made of metal alloys that hadn't even been smelted in known ancient metallurgy. The hieroglyphs depicted systems of hydraulics and electromagnetic force as though the pyramid wasn't just symbolic, it was functional. He even claimed one chamber housed a system still producing a faint electromagnetic field, as if something deep beneath the pyramid was still running after thousands of years. Egyptian officials quickly intervened. His team's samples were confiscated, the tunnels sealed, and future excavations banned for safety. Later researchers, including engineer Robert Bauval, examined Barrés's surviving sketches and agreed they showed technical knowledge that shouldn't have existed 4,000 years ago. Bauval believed the pyramid might have been designed to resonate energy not as a power plant, but as an enormous acoustic and electromagnetic amplifier harnessing natural forces of the Earth. And that's not as wild as it sounds. Modern studies, including one from Nature Physics 2018, found that the Great Pyramid's shape naturally concentrates electromagnetic energy in its internal chambers at specific resonant frequencies. So while it's unlikely the Egyptians built a generator, they did intuitively design one of the most mathematically precise structures on Earth, a monument that interacts with physics itself. Why would such findings be suppressed? Politics, pride, and preservation. Egypt's heritage laws often block foreign excavations near the Sphinx and pyramids, partly to prevent structural damage, but also to control narratives about foreign discoveries. Still, radar and WAN scans continue to reveal new voids under Giza, one large enough to fit an airplane hangar still unexplored. So maybe Barrés wasn't imagining things after all. Maybe he just glimpsed something too advanced to fit his century's worldview. But Egypt isn't the only place where buried civilizations rewrite history. Because deep in the Amazon rainforest, one American archaeologist uncovered evidence that indigenous societies built cities more sustainable, more democratic, and more technologically balanced than anything Europe had at the time before their memory was wiped out. Let's head into the jungle and uncover the mystery of the classified civilizations. The classified civilizations. When you picture the Amazon, you might imagine endless jungle, untouched, untamed, and empty of civilization. But in 1967, American archaeologist Dr. Richard Thompson found evidence that flipped that idea upside down. Hidden beneath the dense canopy were traces of advanced cities complete with road systems, irrigation networks, and urban planning that rivaled anything in Europe at the time. Thompson's excavations revealed pottery metallurgy and architecture that didn't fit colonial-era stereotypes of primitive tribes. The people who lived there had built sustainable, mathematically precise societies, balancing agriculture, engineering, and ecology in ways modern cities still struggle to achieve. Satellite imagery later confirmed what Thompson had seen firsthand: vast geoglyphs and city grids stretching across hundreds of miles. These weren't isolated villages. They were organized civilizations with sophisticated governance, astronomy, and possibly written language. But when Thompson tried to publish his findings, the response was immediate and chilling. His research was classified by the US and Brazilian governments, citing national security concerns. Within months, the sites were bulldozed under development programs, and Thompson himself was reassigned to unrelated work. Why would anyone hide proof of advanced indigenous civilizations? Because it challenges a deeply rooted narrative that European colonizers brought civilization to the Americas. In truth, evidence now shows the opposite Amazonian cultures mastered ecological engineering centuries earlier. They created terra preta, an incredibly fertile black soil enriched with charcoal and nutrients that still supports agriculture today. NASA satellite data even reveals that the Amazon's most biodiverse regions align with ancient human settlements. The rainforest, it turns out, isn't wild by accident, it's partly human-designed. Modern archaeologists like Anna Roosevelt and Michael Heckenberger have validated much of what Thompson hinted at. They've found planned cities, green roads, and even evidence of representative governance among ancient Amazonian societies systems far more egalitarian than contemporary Europe. So maybe the cover-up wasn't just political, it was philosophical. It's easier to erase history than admit we've misunderstood progress itself. Thompson's story ends predictably permits revoked archives sealed and the excavation sites lost to deforestation. But the satellites keep finding clues, faint outlines of geometric patterns just beneath the trees. The rainforest, it seems, remembers what history forgot. And that brings us full circle from buried machines under the Sphinx to metal libraries and erased cities. What connects them all isn't just mystery, it's a pattern. Knowledge discovered, knowledge suppressed. Which leads to one final question. What if humanity's greatest discoveries aren't ahead of us, but behind us? Let's close with that thought. Across continents and millennia, the pattern repeats like a forgotten equation. Anomalies beneath the Sphinx, fossils that rewrite evolution, cities in the jungle that shouldn't exist. Each discovery whispers the same story that human progress isn't linear but cyclical. Civilizations rise, fall, and leave fragments of brilliance behind. Some are lost to time. Others perhaps are deliberately hidden. Maybe the truth isn't that our ancestors were primitive. Maybe they were different kinds of advanced. Ancient Egyptians built with cosmic precision. The Maya tracked planetary orbits without telescopes. Indigenous Amazonians mastered sustainability we still can't replicate. And when those truths threaten modern hierarchies or profits, well, history has a delete key. But here's the inspiring part. Every time knowledge is buried, curiosity digs it back up. Science thrives not on certainty, but on questions, the willingness to say, what if? So whether these legends are literal truths, exaggerated myths, or metaphors for lost wisdom, they remind us that curiosity itself is humanity's oldest technology. Maybe the beauty of discovery isn't about proving ancient aliens or secret machines. It's about realizing that every mystery we chase brings us closer to understanding ourselves. Which of these hidden histories amazed you the most? Tell me in the comments, and if you love exploring the edge where science meets mystery, subscribe. Because the next great discovery might already be under our feet, waiting once again to be uncovered.